So what I've done now is I've rendered out another preview render and loaded into the frame buffer here, which makes really easy to the RAM player, so that it'll play back in real time. We can see some of the things that we've changed. I increased the amount of bounce in the belly quite high. I think I've got it up at 1700 now. So you could see it, just see what it's doing. So you can see the amount of jiggle that's going on. Again, any amount of these can be added, but like I say, be very careful of the fact that speed is a big issue when trying to animate with them on. I haven't corrected the left knee or elbow yet, but something you should make note of is the correction that we did on the right elbow and how it really isn't working. Remember I said if you have one morph on something that rotates this much, often in the 50% position it's not going to look quite right, and you can see that it's already starting to mash in the bicep to make room for the forearm. Problem is that it isn't getting there yet. So really those elbows need to have an intermediary morph target on them for the 50% rotation position, so that you don't have this look where it's being pushed in yet the two haven't even collided yet. RAM Player is great, by the way, for being able to test this kind of stuff. You can load in an A and B track the way I did last time and actually scrub between the two. Holding down your right mouse button and scrubbing back and forth on it, you actually get ability to be able to scrub through it and see true frame counts and see it in real time, hitting play. You can even play it backwards. What's also nice is you can even change your frame rate or type whatever frame rate you want in, and it's great for if you're looking at an animation, you're wondering should the whole thing be a little bit slower or a little bit faster. You can actually just check the frame rate that you are interested in, and see if it actually helps your animation or something. Often I find with students is that making it faster is usually the key. It's very rare that things need to go slower in student animation. Everything's usually very slow. So anyways, you can change it up on the fly while it's playing, and it'll just adjust for itself. Okay, so let's take a look at actually being able to turn off all of the spring controllers in a scene. This is going to be a pretty rudimentary script for this intermediate level. It's not going to have a whole lot of error checking. However, it won't cause any errors. It could miss some spring controllers, though. That's I'm not going to get into having to search down all of the possible list controllers you could have on an object. And writing recursive scripts to find all the spring controllers. Just going to go new script here. I'm going to also open the MaxScript listener, which will feed back the information to us. I'll just clear it. Let's first find out how we get a hold of this spring controller, how we actually find it on the object. Our script is going to assume we have a list controller, a position list, and that we have controllers in it. It isn't going to assume that the spring is going to be the second one. It's just going to look for the spring controller. So with that selected, let's actually see if we can find the spring controller first off. So $, and let me just increase the font size here. $, will return to us this currently selected object. So if I highlight that and press Shift Enter, it'll return back to us the point helper we currently have selected. Dot position, or POS, will return back the position of the object. Dot controller after that, and Shift Enter, will return back the actual controller on the position of the object, which is the position list. Now you can then look by iteration of controller. The first one is the position XYZ. Second one is the spring. Third is available. fourth is weight. So now we're going down through all the different possibilities on it. So we know it's the second one, but it may not be the second one on every object. So we can actually call them by name. Name is noted by the number sign, and the name of it is spring. So $.position.controller number sign spring will find the spring controller, so the one named spring, in this list. Changing the name of it will make this become incorrect, so keep this the way you the way that it's named. The other thing you could actually do is set it up so that you could name your spring controllers specifically for different characters or different parts of the character, and simply be able to turn them on and off based on this name. It's certainly an easy way to go. Now, to find all the parameters on this spring controller, to find out how we get access to this, we can use show, shift enter, and what it'll do is it'll list back everything that we can get access to on this controller. Go to effect how, force nodes, steps, XYZ, effect, start, and position. So what we're looking for is actually the iterations. For some reason it's called something different. It's called steps and not iterations. We can test that theory. I'm just going to copy that line, go dot steps, and evaluate that, and you'll notice it returns a value of 2, and it happens to be our value here. If I say equals 0, it's now equal to 0. So changing this will update this value. So now we have direct access to a given selected object that has a spring controller inside of a list position. What we need to do is we need to write a little piece of code that'll actually find all of the spring controllers in the scene. And the way you get at all the objects in the scene is keyword objects. Objects returns all of the objects in the scene as an array. So objects 1 will return the first object in the scene. In this case it happens to be the ogre body. Number 200 is undefined. It means we don't have 200 objects in there. Let's try 100. That is the left arm bone in the ogre. So we can go through each and every single one of these. The simple and fastest way to write a loop, to loop through all of them, is for O in objects do. What this will do is it'll iterate through all of the objects in O, and all of the objects in the scene, and it'll make each one at a time become equal to O. Set of brackets after it. And now what we're going to do is we're going to use our line that we created here, but this time we're going to say O dot, and we'll set it up to set it to 0 to first off. So this is the one turning it off. So now what this is going to do is it's going to loop through all of the objects in the scene, make O become equal to each object one at a time, and it's going to go through and it's going to try and change the steps. I'm going to highlight all of that and say shift enter, and you notice that right off the bat it throws a bunch of errors. It's because it got to the first object in the scene, which happened to be the ogre body, and it couldn't find a spring controller and it couldn't set the steps to 0, so it just errored out. For cheap fast error checking, we could check for the check for a spring controller and actually go in and look to see if it is the right class of object. But again, I'll deal with that more in the advanced series. And besides, this is a perfectly acceptable way to do it. We're going to wrap the command in a try catch. Try catch basically says try this, if not, do that. And in this case, we're not doing anything at all. This is much slower than doing if statements and properly searching for the object. However, this is just a really fast way to write things. You don't have to know what the class of the object is. You just simply say try these set of commands, and if it doesn't work, just don't do anything at all and just keep going. Just keep trying it. So what I'm going to do now again is I want to highlight the entire for loop, shift enter. It says OK as it's after wrapping through everything, and it's set the iterations of this spring controller iterations to 0. So this will do all the spring controllers that lie in a list on the object. Let's actually make ourselves a toolbar to handle that. We're going to say customize, and we're going to go to toolbars, new, and we'll go call it something, character controls, say OK. That gives us this little toolbar that we can now add buttons to. You can drag and drop buttons out of the customize user interface dialog, or you can actually drag and drop code right into it, and it'll write the macro script for you. So we're going to use this as the off. We're going to highlight it and drag it in, and it creates a button now. And if I set this back to an iterations of 2, hit that button, it now sets it back to iterations of 0. Dragging and dropping it onto here has actually written the code for us. If I right click on it and pick edit macro script, you can actually see the macro script. There's the code that we wrote, and it's written it in the macro script header, wrapped it around it, and generated a macro script for us. This has been stored in the 3D Studio Max 6 UI macro scripts folder, and I'll just go to that point here, and it'll be called drag and drop macro 3 MCR. So I've got drag and drop macro 3 MCR. So there's my code there. So I could open this up, retitle it to something that's more obvious and more useful. Change the category from drag and drop to my character tools, whatever. Add a tooltip so that when mouse is over top of the button, it actually pops up, tells you what it is. There are other options you can add to macro scripts as well that you can find in the help. You can even set the name of it and whatnot can show up. You can doctor that right in here as well and say customize, edit button appearance, and say tooltip, and write this in here. Let's see, spring off, and button text, spring off. And now you can see the button is showing up. With different information on it. You can define that as well right in the macro scripts though, with the tooltips and the name of it and everything, instead of having to override it with the this item here. I would suggest personally doing it in, right in the script itself. So now let's set it so we have one for turning it on. So I'm just going to change it to a value of 2. Drop that in there, and now again I can say edit button appearance. Spring on. Now I've got my 2 buttons. Give it a quick test. Turns all the springs on. I have now one that turns all the springs off. As more advanced Max script methods, you could also get into writing callback scripts that would sit and wait for the scene to render, and it would automatically go through, find all the spring controllers, and turn them all on for render time, and turn them all off on post-render so that they all shut back off again, so that when you open the file they're not already turned on. This is great ways of automating your pipeline, your character pipeline, to be able to handle more complicated characters and whatnot that have intricacies to them that need to be adjusted. You could also create interfaces and tool sets that would be on floating panels, much like the sets of tools that I write that have got many tools involved in them. And again, this is all MaxScript that can control different things about Max. So you could also add areas to control things like the effect and whatnot. You may have to animate these over time to get them to work correctly. So instead of having to find the object and dig through into the motion panel to find the controls, it might be better for the animator or whoever's setting it up if they had a floating panel that already worked on everything in the character, and they didn't have to go hunting for things. So you could build UIs like that. Again, the advanced series will deal more with setting up those kinds of control panels.